Day, the world narrowed to the size of a single photograph. My boy's smiling face frozen in the glare of a hospital lamp, the cheap cardboard wreath someone had left by the bed, the little scuff on the cuff of his jacket where he'd tugged at it when he laughed. His name tastes like ash in my mouth now. Say it, and the room fills with the echo of engines and then silence. He was everything I had. Then the room changed shape around his absence. The house that had held his laughter seemed too large, the chair where he used to sit like an accusation. Grief made my hands tremble, but grief was not the same thing as weakness. I learned that the hard way. Her name was Marina. She smiled the way a wound smiles, soft, practiced, full of teeth. At the funeral, she held herself like a woman who belonged to the world by right, arranged the flowers, told the nicest stories, and when the last visitor left, she leaned close to me and spoke like a judge passing sentence. "You should go now, Teresa," she said, all honey. "There's nothing for you here. The house is mine now. You will find somewhere else," she promised. Smiled the promise. That she would leave me without a house, without a penny, homeless after my son's death. She said it as if it were mercy, as if I were the problem. They say shock freezes time. For me, betrayal did. I stood in my son's house with a plastic bag of the few things I had brought from my old flat and listened to Marina give orders to men who wouldn't look me in the eye, as if I had become a stain on the furniture. She shipped away his boots, changed the locks while I stood at the window, and watched my life become something I had to look at through glass. The police shrugged when I called. "It's a family matter," they said. Someone had already produced papers, a hurried document, the sort you sign in the shadow of a hospital bed, when the heart is soft and the head is fogged with morphine. My signature, they told me later, was on a page that named Marina sole executor of everything. My name was small print in a will I had never seen, dated the day after the funeral. I could have let the world decide what I deserved. I could have swallowed my anger, packed my few shirts, and walked away like a woman broken into pieces. I did the opposite. I turned my fury into a ledger, and where I could not speak, I wrote. I began to collect, not to loot, but to gather truth. First, I cataloged what I knew: the house deed, the bank accounts, the insurance policy, which I learned had been paid through a joint card that had been used by Marina in the weeks before the accident. I called the hospital and asked for copies of records. I knocked on the neighbor's door until old Mr. Kamau, who had watched my son grow up, told me what he'd seen. The little blue hatchback that had left the night my son died. The way Marina had asked my son in front of others whether he still drank on the job. I found the CCTV at the corner shop. The owner, a timid man named Wanjiru, agreed to show me a grainy clip. The footage was ordinary, cars in a rain-silvered night, but the sequence contained a single frame where a different vehicle had followed my son for a block. Small things, little toothings of evidence, the kind people throw away as coincidence. I began to assemble them because the law, the thing I now trusted like an arm around me, favors patterns over whispers. I learned quickly that revenge dressed itself in two suits, one criminal, one civil. If Marina had moved assets, if signatures were false, if she had used the power of her presence to steal what my son had built, she had left tracks. People make mistakes when they think grief will hide them. They forget to delete an email, copy a message, tell the wrong listener a truth. I learned the art of listening to fragile things. I recorded our conversations only after she spoke to me in the doorway, promising me coldly that I would have the street. And those promises became the first bead of proof that this was not merely a family quarrel, but a campaign. I kept receipts. I kept the torn corner of a bank envelope. I made notes in a little black book and learned to date everything. When I went to a lawyer, a woman named Aisha, who smelled of coffee and fierce logic, she did not console me. She looked at my folder and smiled the way a smith smiles at an iron that will take shape. "We will do this with patience," she said. "We will build a chain. One link at a time." The first link was a petition to open probate. The second, a request for a temporary injunction to prevent Marina from selling assets. The third was the one that made her pale, an application to be recognized as an interested party, the mother of the deceased, and therefore entitled to examination of the documents that made her executor. She tried to call me frantic, to cajole with honey, to bargain with threats thinly disguised as concerns. "You will ruin the family," she said once, as if the family were a thing you could ruin, and her theft an act of preservation. But threats, when recorded and delivered to a court clerk, have a way of becoming just words. The injunction froze the accounts. A bailiff came with papers that read like a curtain falling. For the first time in weeks, I slept in the house that smelled like my son's favorite cologne. They came for me in quiet and for Marina in spectacle. The police reopened the accident file when a coroner's note arrived that contradicted the original report. My lawyer had found a forensics specialist who read engine failure the way a poet reads a rhyme. The pattern suggested external manipulation, and the insurance company, which once whispered to Marina in the hope of a quick settlement, now sent a man with a suit and a briefcase who asked very direct questions. The web of Marina's haste grew visible. Phone transfers to a friend, a cashier's check deposited into an account with a name I had never heard, a signature on a will that a forensic document examiner said did not match the decedent's known handwriting. It was no longer possible for the police to shrug and say, "Family matter." Fingerprints of intent were all over it. The first court day felt like a spring of light after a winter of small, suffocating rooms. Marina had lawyers who tried to shout down the facts with busy voices, with disdain like perfume, but evidence is indifferent to theatrics. In court, the neighbor testified about the blue hatchback. Wanjiru, the shop owner, handed over the CCTV copy, which the prosecutor had cleaned up until the image showed what it had always hinted at. Another car trailing, a hand reaching to change something under a fender, a shadow leaning toward a parked vehicle. My heart thudded like a fist as one witness after another told the story I had been piecing together in solitary. The judge listened with his pen poised like a scalpel. When Marina's defense leaned on an unsigned memo, the handwriting expert, a woman with a voice like dry leaves, spoke carefully and then plainly. These signatures were not his. The courtroom tasted of coffee and varnished wood, and when the clerk read the judge's order, it felt like thunder. I had not wanted spectacle for its own sake. I wanted justice, but justice is a shape with room for fury. Marina was indicted on charges of embezzlement and elder abuse. Her assets were frozen. The probate judge set aside the hastily produced will for further review. The press, which once had circled for gossip, now came for facts. They asked me, in microphones and bright lights, if I felt satisfied. I said only this, that my son's name deserved the dignity of truth, and that no one should be able to make grief a currency they could spend. We will continue.